Please, I've been a customer here for 35 years. Martha Johnson begged as teller Madison Parker sprayed perfume directly in her face. Security guard Jake dragged the 78-year-old outside and shoved her onto concrete. They saw muddy overalls and assumed poverty, ignorance, irrelevance. They didn't know why Martha was really there that morning. And they had no idea that within hours, they'd be begging her not to destroy them. Before watching, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. The Texas sun was already baking the earth at 5 in the morning. Martha Johnson, known to everyone ASMJ, wiped sweat from her forehead with a gloved hand. She had spent the last 2 hours helping a heifer deliver a calf in the barn. Her overalls were caked in mud, manure, and the red dust of Cedar Valley. To anyone passing by, she looked like a struggling farm worker making ends meet. But to Martha, this dirt was the badge of a life lived with purpose and integrity. The land stretched before her, thousands of acres of prime Texas grazing land she'd worked for decades. In the distance, oil pumps bobbed rhythmically, black gold flowing from wells she and Howard had drilled. She patted the pocket of her apron, checking for the leather-bound bankbook she'd carried for 35 years. The same book she'd used to deposit her first $100 back in 1989. The same bank that had financed their first oil well, their first herd, their first dream. "Time to go see the city folks, Howard," she whispered to the morning air. She climbed into her 1985 Ford pickup, the engine coughing and sputtering before catching. The drive to town was usually peaceful, a moment to think and plan her day. But today, something felt different, though she couldn't quite name the feeling yet. Martha parked her rusted truck between 2 gleaming luxury sedans in the bank's parking lot. The contrast was stark, her faded blue paint against their mirror-polished black and silver finishes. She walked toward the glass doors, her work boots leaving faint, dusty prints on the pavement. Inside, the air conditioning hit her like a wall of ice, sharp and unwelcoming. The marble floors gleamed aggressively under crystal chandeliers that sparkled like diamonds. Everything about the space screamed money, exclusivity, and cold professional distance from ordinary life. Madison Parker sat behind the main teller counter, examining her manicured nails with intense concentration. She wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than Martha's monthly ranch operating expenses. Her blonde hair was styled in perfect waves, her makeup applied with the precision of a professional artist. She looked up as an elderly man in a worn jacket approached her window nervously. "Can I help you?" Madison asked, her tone already dismissive before he'd said a word. "I'd like to open a savings account," the man said, pulling crumpled bills from his pocket. Madison glanced at the money, her nose wrinkling slightly in visible disgust at the worn bills. "Sir, our services start at $1,000 minimum balance for new accounts," she said smoothly. The old man's face fell, his hope visibly draining away in real time. "Perhaps Wells Fargo would be more appropriate for your financial situation," Madison suggested with false sympathy. The man nodded, gathered his money, and shuffled away, shoulders slumped in quiet humiliation. Madison returned to her nails, already forgetting him completely before he'd reached the door. When the automatic doors opened again, Madison's nose twitched at a new scent entering the lobby. She looked up and saw Martha standing patiently in the queue, bankbook clutched in both hands. Madison's perfectly groomed eyebrows rose slightly, taking in the muddy overalls and work-worn appearance. She leaned over to whisper to the teller beside her, loud enough for nearby customers to hear. "Is the sewer backing up again? Or DID, someone leave the livestock doors open?" The other teller giggled, covering her mouth with her hand but not hiding her amusement. Martha heard the comment, but kept her expression neutral, her dignity refusing to acknowledge the insult. She watched the electronic number board, waiting for her turn like any other customer in line. The man ahead of her finished his transaction and walked away, leaving Martha as next. "Excuse me, ma'am. Deliveries and service entrances are located in the back alley," Madison announced loudly. Martha looked up, meeting Madison's eyes directly with quiet strength and unexpected patience. "I'm not making a delivery, dear. I'm a customer here to conduct my banking business." Madison's smile was sharp and cold, hair tone dripping with false politeness and concealed contempt. "We serve paying customers here, not people looking for handouts or seeking charity from financial institutions." She deliberately looked past Martha to a well-dressed man standing behind her in the queue. "Number 24, please step forward to the window," Madison called out, completely ignoring Martha's number. Martha held up her ticket, the number 23 clearly printed on the small paper slip. "Miss, I believe I was next in line. I have number 23 right here." Madison made a show of sniffing the air dramatically, her face contorting into exaggerated disgust. "I honestly can't hear you over the overwhelming smell of cow manure and farm animals." The man in the suit behind Martha chuckled, pulling out a handkerchief to cover his nose theatrically. "Just leave, lady. You're making everyone lose their appetite and ruining the professional atmosphere here." Martha's grip on her bankbook tightened, her knuckles turning white with the force of restraint. She thought of Howard, of the years they'd built this town's economy from nothing but sweat. She thought of the oil wells, the cattle, Thailand, the wealth they'd created with their hands. But she kept her voice steady, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her anger. "I have been banking at this institution since before you were born, young lady." Madison's laugh was sharp and cruel, designed to cut rather than express genuine amusement at all. "And I've been breathing fresh air until you walked through those doors this morning." She raised her voice, making sure everyone in the lobby could hear her next words clearly. "Security, we have a sanitation hazard in the lobby that needs immediate removal from the premises." Jake Thompson appeared from his post near the entrance, his muscular frame imposing and intimidating. He was built like a college linebacker, all shoulders and aggression wrapped in a cheap security uniform. He didn't ask questions or seek context. He just saw an elderly woman causing some kind of disturbance. "Let's go, Grandma. Time to head back to wherever you came from," Jake grunted dismissively. He grabbed Martha's upper arm with unnecessary force, his thick fingers digging into her flesh. "Unhand me, young man. I am a paying customer and a citizen of this town." Jake's grip tightened, his patience clearly thin, and his temper clearly ready to escalate the situation. "Look, I get it. Rural life is hard, but there are standards here," Madison called from her window. "This is a financial institution, not a petting zoo where anyone can just wander in off the street." Martha tried to pull her arm free, but Jake's grip was like iron, bruising and painful. "I demand to speak to the manager about this treatment immediately," Martha said, her voice still controlled. "The manager doesn't have time for people like you," Jake said, pushing her toward the revolving doors. "Wait, I need to," Martha began, but Jake shoved her forward with both hands now. Martha stumbled, her worn boots slipping on the polished marble floor that was slick as ice. She fell forward, her knees hitting the hard surface with a crack that echoed through the lobby. Her bankbook slid across the tiles, spinning and sliding until it stopped at Madison's designer high heels. Madison looked down at the worn leather book, its pages yellowed with age and constant use. She wrinkled her nose again, as if the book itself carried the smell she'd been mocking. Then she lifted her foot and kicked it toward the exit like it was a piece of trash. "Don't come back until you've had a chemical bath and learned what professional standards mean." Martha pushed herself up from the floor, her knees screaming in pain from the impact. Around her, other customers pretended not to see, their eyes sliding away in guilty, uncomfortable silence. One young woman near the back looked troubled, her face conflicted, but she said absolutely nothing. Martha gathered her bankbook from where it lay near the door, clutching it against her chest protectively. She straightened her spine, refusing to let them see how much this humiliation had wounded her pride. "I will remember this moment, and very soon you will remember it too," Martha said quietly. Her voice was steady, but underneath it lay something cold and immovable as bedrock under Texas soil. Madison was already back on her phone, scrolling through social media, her attention already completely elsewhere. Jake held the door open with exaggerated courtesy, a mocking bow as Martha walked through into the heat. "Have a blessed day, Grandma, and try the soup kitchen 3 blocks down if you're hungry." The door closed behind Martha with a soft pneumatic hiss, sealing her out like unwanted air. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, the morning sun already burning hot on her face. Her knees ached, her arm throbbed where Jake had grabbed her, and her heart felt heavy with betrayal. But she didn't cry because tears were for grief, and this situation required something else entirely: strategy. The drive back to the ranch was silent, but Martha's mind was already 3 steps ahead. She didn't waste energy on anger. Instead, she channeled it into calculation and cold, focused planning. She pulled her truck past the rusted front gates that marked the entrance to her property. Most people saw those gates and assumed poverty, saw the humble farmhouse and assumed struggle. They never drove far enough to see what lay beyond that first false impression of hardship. Dozens of oil pumps stretched across the landscape, their rhythmic bobbing extracting wealth from deep underground. Thousands of head of prime cattle grazed on grass so rich it looked painted green by artists. The ranch wasn't just a home, it was an empire built by 2 people's hands over decades. Martha parked near the house and walked inside, her boots leaving dusty prints on the wooden floor. She moved through the simple kitchen, past the worn furniture, into the study at the back. On the wall hung a framed photograph of her and Howard from 1982, both of them young. They were covered in oil grease, grinning wildly, standing in front of their first successful gusher. "They forgot who built the ground they stand on, Howard," she told the photograph softly. She walked to the bookshelf that lined one entire wall, reaching for a specific leather-bound volume. She pulled it toward her, and the entire shelf swung outward, revealing a heavy steel safe behind. With steady hands, she spun the combination dial, left 32, right 18, left 7. The safe door clicked open heavily, revealing stacks of documents and a single velvet jewelry box. Inside the box sat a black metal card with platinum edging, catching light like liquid mercury. The Platinum Elite Customer Card, issued by the bank's Private Wealth Management Division to exclusive clients. It was a card held by fewer than 10 people in the entire state of Texas. Beside it lay a quarterly statement with numbers that would make most people's eyes water. Assets under management: $2.8 billion in various accounts in investment vehicles. Money makes you comfortable, character makes you rich, Howard used to say over dinner every night. Martha had lived by that philosophy, hiding her wealth to stay grounded in reality and connected to her roots. She'd worn overalls to the bank for 35 years, and no one had ever treated her differently before. But somewhere along the way, the bank had changed its values without changing its name. She realized now that her humility had been mistaken for weakness by people who valued only surface appearances. She closed the safe and walked to her bedroom, to the walk-in closet she rarely opened anymore. In the back, preserved in garment bag sand, protected from dust, hung what she called her armor. She selected a custom-tailored cream suit, Italian wool so fine it felt like water between her fingers. She pulled out the Harry Winston diamond necklace Howard had given her for their 50th wedding anniversary. 3 carats, emerald cut, set in platinum that caught every ray of light like captured stars. She sat at her vanity, a piece of furniture that hadn't been used since Howard's funeral. She applied lipstick with the precision of a warrior putting on war paint before an important battle. In the mirror, the transformation was complete. The vulnerable farm woman disappeared, the matriarch of Texas oil merged. She walked to the garage, passing by the old Ford pickup that usually carried her everywhere. Under a heavy canvas tarp sat a vehicle she hadn't driven since she'd buried Howard 3 years ago. She pulled the tarp away, revealing a white Bentley Flying Spur, its paint still pristine and perfect. Howard had bought it for her 60th birthday, insisting she deserved to ride like the queen she was. She'd driven it twice, once to accept it, once to his funeral, and then never again. The grief had been too heavy to carry in something that represented his love so perfectly. But today, the grief transformed into something else: purpose, justice, and a lesson that needed teaching. She started the engine, and the motor purred like a contented panther, smooth and powerful and controlled. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror one last time, recognizing the elegant woman staring back. 35 years of loyalty destroyed in 35 minutes by children who don't understand consequences, she murmured. She put the car in gear and drove toward town, the Bentley gliding over the rough road effortlessly. She thought about Madison's face, the casual cruelty in those young eyes that had never known real hardship. She thought about Jake's rough hands, the Havel way he had enjoyed the power his uniform gave him over others. They had judged her by the dust on her boots and the mud on her overalls. Now they would be judged by the weight of her portfolio and the power of her economic influence. As she approached the city limits, Shep pressed the button on her steering wheel to activate Bluetooth. "Call Charles," she commanded, and the phone rang once before her attorney picked up immediately. "Martha, how are you this morning?" Charles Whitmore's voice was warm and genuinely concerned as always. "Charles, meet me at First National Bank in exactly 10 minutes, she said, her tone leaving no room for questions. "Prepare the complete account transfer documents for my entire estate portfolio immediately." There was a on the other end of the line, then Charles's voice came back cautious. "All of it? Martha, that will financially devastate the branch, possibly force them to close their doors." "That is not a concern of mine, Charles. That is precisely and exactly the objective I'm pursuing." She could almost hear Charles's sharp intake of breath, his lawyer's mind already calculating the implications. "Understood. I'll have everything ready when you arrive, and I'll meet you in the parking lot." She ended the call and focused on driving, the Bentley turning heads at every intersection it passed. People stopped on sidewalks to stare, wondering what dignitary was visiting their small town this morning. Martha parked directly in front of the bank, right in the clearly marked no parking tow zone. She stepped out, the diamonds at her throat catching the morning sun and throwing rainbow light everywhere. Jake was standing outside near the entrance, smoking a cigarette and checking his phone between drags. He dropped the cigarette mid-puff when He saw the Bentley, his mouth literally hanging open in shock. He didn't recognize the elegant woman in the cream suit as the one he'd thrown out yesterday. But he recognized power when he saw it, recognized money when it pulled up in imported luxury. "Good morning, ma'am. Welcome to First National Bank," Jake stammered, rushing to open the door for her. Martha didn't look at him, didn't acknowledge his existence, even as he held the door open wide. She looked through him as if he were made of glass, completely transparent and utterly beneath her notice. She entered the lobby, her Italian leather heels tapping a rhythmic countdown on the polished marble floor. Click, click, click. The sound echoed through the space, cutting through conversations and drawing every eye. The murmur of customer conversations died instantly, replaced by a heavy, expectant silence that hung like fog. Madison was at her station, scrolling through Instagram, double-tapping photos, and completely absorbed in her phone. She looked up casually, then did a double-take when she saw the suit, the diamonds, the unmistakable aura of wealth. Her entire demeanor transformed instantly, her face rearranging into a mask of professional eagerness and false warmth. "Welcome, madam. How may I be of exceptional service to you today?" Madison practically sang the words. Her voice had jumped 2 octaves higher, dripping with the sweetness she reserved for people she deemed important. "I need to speak with the branch manager immediately," Martha said, her voice cold as a January wind. "Of course. May I have your name so I can announce you properly?" Madison chirped like an eager bird. Martha removed her designer sunglasses slowly, folding them with deliberate precision before meeting Madison's eyes directly. "You already know my name, because you screamed it at me yesterday while I was lying on your floor." Madison squinted, confusion clouding her heavily made-up eyes as her brain struggled to make the connection. "I'm terribly sorry, but I think you must have me confused with someone else entirely." Madison's voice was still sweet, but a note of uncertainty had crept in like a crack in glass. "I never forget a face, especially one that kicked my bankbook like trash," Martha said calmly. She reached into her Hermes bag, her movements deliberate and controlled to maximize the dramatic effect. She pulled out the Platinum Elite customer card, the black metal gleaming under the lobby's crystal chandeliers. She placed it on the counter with a heavy, metallic thud that seemed impossibly loud in the silence. "Run it," Martha commanded, and the single word carried the weight of absolute, unquestionable authority. Madison's hand trembled visibly as she reached for the card, her perfectly manicured fingers shaking now. The black and silver design was legendary, something tellers only heard about in training sessions and company lore. She picked it up carefully, as if it might burn her, her fingerprints leaving small marks on the metal. She swiped it through the reader with shaking hands, silently praying for a system error or malfunction. The computer terminal let out a loud, distinctive chime that everyone in the lobby heard clearly. VIP alert. Red banners began flashing across Madison's screen in urgent, pulsing letters. Ultra High Net WORTHIN DIVIDUAL. Madison's eyes widened to the size of saucers as numbers began populating the balance field on her screen. 2,800,000,000, she whispered, her voice failing completely on the last word. The color drained from her face so rapidly it looked like someone had pulled a plug and emptied her. "Is there a problem with the smell of my money?" Martha asked softly, her tone deadly and precise. The lobby was so silent you could have heard a pin drop on the marble from 50 feet away. Every customer had stopped what they were doing to watch this scene unfold before them like theater. "Mrs. Johnson, I had absolutely no idea who you were," Madison stuttered, pale as fresh milk now. "You had no idea because you lack the Kara vision, to see people as anything other than their surface appearance." The door to the branch manager's office suddenly burst open with a bang that made several people jump. Brian Davis, the branch manager, ran out adjusting his tie frantically as he rushed across the lobby floor. He had received the digital VIP alert on his personal terminal and understood the catastrophe unfolding before him. "Mrs. Johnson, what an incredible honor. Please come to our VIP lounge where we can serve you properly." Brian's voice was desperate, his face already red with panic as he tried to salvage the unsalvageable situation. He tried to guide her away from the watching crowd with gentle pressure on her arm. "I prefer to stand right here where everyone can see and hear what I have to say." Martha planted her cane firmly on the marble floor, a gesture of immovable resolve and absolute determination. "Yesterday, your security guard physically assaulted me and threw me onto the pavement like a bag of garbage." Brian's face turned from red to purple, even throbbing visibly in his temple as he processed the information. He turned to look at Madison and Jake, both of whom now looked like they wanted to sink through the floor. "Is this true? Did you actually assault our most valuable client and largest account holder?" Brian demanded shrilly. "She was wearing dirty overalls. She looked exactly like a homeless person," Jake blurted out in panicked defense. "So you openly admit you assault people based solely on their clothing and physical appearance?" Martha asked calmly. "No. I mean, it was just a terrible misunderstanding of the situation." Jake backpedaled desperately, sweat appearing on his forehead. "There is no misunderstanding here," Martha said, her voice carrying clearly across the entire marble lobby now. "I trusted this institution with my life's work, my husband's legacy, for 35 continuous years of loyalty. I believed my decades of faithful business earned me respect, not a chemical bath and public humiliation." She looked directly at Madison, who was now crying openly, mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers. "You told me to go to a soup kitchen because you judged me unworthy of basic human dignity." "I'm so sorry, please. I have rent to pay and student loans." Madison sobbed, her voice breaking completely. "And I have a withdrawal to make that will change both of our lives forever," Martha replied without emotion. She turned to Brian, whose face had gone from purple to a sickly shade of gray. "I am closing all my accounts, investments, and holdings, effective immediately, and transferring everything out." "Please, Mrs. Johnson, that's literally impossible. We don't have the liquidity to cover that amount." Brian panicked visibly. "Then call the Federal Reserve, call the Treasury Department, call whoever you need to call immediately. I want every single penny transferred to JP Morgan Chase by 5 o'clock this afternoon without exception." "Mrs. Johnson, this will destroy the branch completely. We'll be forced to close our doors permanently," Brian begged. "You destroyed this branch yesterday when you allowed a culture of arrogance to rot your business from the inside." Martha leaned in close to Madison, who was shaking so violently her jewelry was making audible clicking sounds. "You judged me by my cover, darling, by the mud on my boots, and the work on my clothes. Now you are being judged by your contents, and you have been measured and found completely empty." The crowd in the lobby began to whisper among themselves, and then someone in the back started clapping slowly. Others joined in, the applause building until it filled the entire space with the sound of vindication and justice. Near the corner, a young woman named Emily watched with tears in her eyes and awe on her face. Emily had been the only teller who'd tried to help Martha up yesterday when she'd fallen on the floor. Martha noticed her now, remembered that small act of kindness in a sea of cruelty and indifference. "You," Martha said, pointing at Emily with her cane across the lobby floor. Emily's eyes went wide with fear, certain she was about to lose her job like everyone else involved. "You tried to help me up when I fell yesterday, even when your colleagues told you not to." "Yes, ma'am, I did," Emily whispered, her voice audible over the crowd noise in the lobby. Martha turned to Brian, who looked like Amen watching his entire career collapse in real time before him. "If you want to save any shred of this business and its remaining reputation in this community, you will immediately promote this young woman to head of customer relations and give her Madison's salary. She is the only person in this entire building who understands what dignity and respect actually mean." Brian nodded vigorously, like a puppet whose strings were being yanked by a frantic puppeteer above him. "Yes! Done! Absolutely! Anything you say, Mrs. Johnson? Whatever you want!" His voice was nearly hysterical now. "Good. Now start the transfer process immediately, and I expect confirmation by end of business today." Martha turned toward the door, and the crowd parted before her like the Red Sea before Moses. Jake stood at the entrance, holding the door open again, but this time his head was bowed in complete shame. "Have a pleasant day, Mrs. Johnson," Jake mumbled to the floor, unable to meet her eyes at all. "I certainly will, now that I've taken out the trash that was polluting this institution," she replied evenly. She stepped into the sunshine, leaving behind the chaos and the crying and the complete destruction she'd wrought. The Bentley started with a purr, and Shed drove away as people on the sidewalk stared and pointed. By the time Martha reached her ranch gates, the news had already broken across local social media. Phones buzzed throughout Cedar Valley as the story spread. "Billionaire in overalls destroys bank that humiliated her." Within 2 hours, the story had been picked up by regional news outlets and was trending on Twitter. Within 6 hours, First National stock had dropped 12% as panic spread among investors and shareholders. Within 48 hours, the regional headquarters had intervened with a team of crisis management specialists. Brian Davis was fired for gross negligence and failure to maintain proper customer service standards and protocol. Madison Parker was terminated immediately for conduct unbecoming and creating a public relations disaster for the company. Jake Thompson was let go without severance for assault and creating a hostile environment for bank customers. Madison's name became synonymous with poor service throughout the county, her story told as a cautionary tale. She ended up working as a server at Adner, 3 blocks from where she used to work. Her tips depended entirely on her ability to be kind, humble, and respectful to every single customer. It was a hard lesson to learn, but she learned it every single shift through small humiliations and corrections. The Cedar Valley branch of First National was eventually shuttered, then sold and rebranded under new ownership entirely. But for Martha, the victory had never been about their destruction or about revenge for its own sake. It was about defending the values she and Howard had built their entire lives upon with their own hands. She sat in her rocking chair on the porch as the sun set over her oil fields in the distance. She held a cup of chamomile tea, looking at the photograph of Howard she'd brought outside with her. The money was safe now in a new bank that understood respect was the foundation of all business. But more importantly, she had reminded an entire town of a truth that had been forgotten in modern times. She took a sip of tea and smiled at the horizon where the sun painted the sky in orange and gold. "We taught them, Howard," she whispered softly to the photograph in her lap, touching his face gently. "True worth doesn't glitter or announce itself loudly. It endures quietly through time and through testing. The evening wind picked up, carrying the scent of grass and earth and the promise of tomorrow's work ahead. Martha closed her eyes, feeling the peace that comes only from standing up for what's right, regardless of cost. In the distance, her cattle lowed softly, and the oil pumps continued their steady rhythm like a heartbeat beneath the earth. She had built an empire on dignity, and today she had defended that empire against those who valued only appearance. The stars began to appear overhead, pinpricks of light in the darkening Texas sky above her land. "Same time tomorrow morning, Howard," she said, standing up and taking her cup back inside the house slowly. "The cows won't feed themselves, and there's work to be done like there always is on a working ranch." She closed the screen door behind her, the sound of it latching a familiar comfort in the evening quiet. Inside, the house was simple, humble, exactly as it had always been despite the billions in her accounts now. Because Martha Johnson had learned long ago that true wealth wasn't measured in money, but in character and integrity. And no amount of humiliation could ever change that fundamental truth she and Howard had lived by together. Do you think Madison deserved to lose her career over one moment of cruelty and poor judgment? Or was Martha's punishment too severe for a young worker who made a terrible mistake? Have you ever been judged by your appearance instead of your character or your true worth? Share your story in the comments below so we can learn from each other's experiences. If you believe respect should be the foundation of every business transaction, please like this video and subscribe. We bring you stories of justice, karma, and the enduring truth that dignity always wins in the end. See you in the next story.